Joe Marino joining us on the Western Hotline. Joe of the Locked On Bills podcast. Joe, you ever look at the moon and think about retirement? You know, I mean, it's just like Darren
I'm
Waller.
not sure I've been there. Maybe one day I'll get there.
Yeah.
That was only week 6, too.
Yeah.
Like, he played the rest of that season.
Yeah.
Anyways.
Well, Darren Waller's back for the Dolphins. Joe and I spent a little time talking about him, kind of remembering his career. And he was mildly productive in that final season with the Giants. And here's Miami pulling Waller out of retirement. He had a off-field injury scare and kind of lost his love of the game. I don't know. Like I'm sure there's plenty of feeling of a desperation move here for Miami. It is basically free. But welcome back, Darren Waller, who the Bills presumably will see twice.
Yeah, it's hard to really get good expectations for what Darren Waller is going to do this year as a player that retired, like you mentioned. He's obviously into his 30s now. It's been a while since he's been a big-time impact player in the league. So obviously the need's pretty big for Miami at tight end, and trading away Jonnu Smith and what they had in his replacements, Farrell Brown, and another depth player that's been there for a few years, Julian Hill. But it's quite the pivot, because that Jonnu Smith role was really important for them last year, and I thought it opened up a lot for their overall offense, kind of having a third guy established to go with Waddle and Hill. And it says this doesn't feel like an upgrade in Eddie Veeds. I don't really know what to expect from him.
Yeah, it's so strange, to have found money there in Jonnu Smith and what he really gave to them, and then to just say goodbye. You know, Joe Marino, the Locked On Bills podcast. Of course, we're always talking about the teams in the division. Miami has been a challenger for the Bills a couple of years, but come up short. The general feeling on Miami, Joe, if we could just stick here for a minute, is everybody seems to think, what are they doing exactly? The trade of Ramsey, I guess it got sour. The trade of Smith, they don't want to pay him. Their coach is back for another year. Tyreek Hill is concerned so much with Noah Lyles and racing. Miami is very much in a what are they doing spot, and I'm not sure if you think Minkah Fitzpatrick solves any of their problems either.
No, I don't think Minkah solves anything. I say that's a bigger return than I was expecting for Ramsey. I thought they would trade Ramsey for a 5th-round pick, so getting Minkah Fitzpatrick back and what that can mean for their safety room, I think, is a big deal. But obviously corner is just a massive concern, and they've got some cap space, so they'll probably sign somebody that's hopefully for them, a functional starter. But this is definitely a peculiar year for Miami, and it certainly feels like, based on the choices they've made with the investments in the offensive line with James Daniels and Larry Borum, and they traded up for Jonas Savianaya, and then they added a couple of bigger backs in Ollie Gordon and Alexander Madison. I think this team wants to become more inside run oriented, kind of a pivot you saw from Sean McVay and the Rams a few years ago, where everything was wide zone, pushing the perimeter, and then the Rams pivoted, and they got some bigger physical interior offensive linemen, some bigger backs, and started to really incorporate that. And so, I think that's where they want to go. I think they want to be a more physical downhill run team, and then obviously get their passing game going. It's still about Waddle and Hill, but last year that Jonnu Smith role in some ways was to overcome some of the deficiencies running the football, where they just didn't have the blocking talent on the edges to be a consistent offense that runs the ball. And I think they've made some personnel changes to kind of get them in a better position to do that. But my questions with Miami are really on defense. I think their offense is going to be fine. If Tua's healthy, there'll be a good offense. But defensively, what do they have in that secondary? At corner is just a big black eye. They're counting on Bradley Chubb and Jalen Phillips to come back from injury. They really didn't do anything last year, either of those players. Still very young on the defensive line outside of Zach Sealer on the interior players. So they got some stuff to figure out there defensively, and they'll have to coach above their talent to be a team that is in the mix for the playoffs, but could blow up. And I feel like there's certainly not a lot of good momentum there in Miami.
Real quick, back to Waller for a moment. If he's healthy, will that work? I mean, is that the type of tight end this run game needs? I mean, here he is talking about he knew he wanted to retire when they were putting him in at fullback to block. I mean, I feel like that's a troubling sign that he left the game because of that. And if you're Miami that has a tight end, that wants a tight end to run block, you might not be getting that.
No, not at all. Darren Waller is not going to help at all with the run blocking. He's a move tight end, right? He's a flex player that probably more of a big slot than anything. Even different than Jonnu Smith. I think of Jonnu Smith as more of a wing type player, kind of attached offset player, where Waller's not really going to help you in inline formations with the blocking, right? So to me, this also signals that Miami wants to move back to more 11 personnel, and maybe like that would get away from what I was kind of getting to with being less of an outside zone, crack toss oriented run scheme and be more of an inside run team that relies less on your perimeter blockers and more on your interior guys where they have some bigger players. And then, you want to be able to space the field a little bit with formational width by having more spread formations. And then that's how you maximize Darren Waller when you have the speed elements of Hill and Waddle. So I think that's kind of the vision for their offense. But no, Waller specifically does not help their run game in any way, shape, or form.
Joe Marino on the Locked On Bills podcast, joining us here on WGR. 3 weeks out from camp. The Steelers side of it, Jalen Ramsey and also getting Jonnu Smith. The Steelers here, they are loading up, Joe, and the Bills will play Pittsburgh once. What is their ceiling, do you think, on this one-year Aaron Rodgers experiment?
I think they can probably – this is a team that's had worse quarterbacks than Aaron Rodgers, worse offensive lines than they have right now. And I would say worse defenses than they have right now and still win 9 or 10 games and get to the playoffs and lose a game. So I think that their roster is in pretty good shape. I don't love Aaron Rodgers at all at quarterback, and I think he somewhat limits the team. But can he be better than Kenny Pickett? Can he be better than Mason Rudolph and they're trying to just figure it out. Justin Fields, Russell Wilson. I think he can be something like that. And with the elevated offensive line and the young pieces they have there, and I think their defense is pretty loaded, especially in the front. I think they're going to be a good team. I worry about Aaron Rodgers and whether or not he can just play his part. And I think that's been a challenge for Aaron Rodgers in his last 2 healthy seasons, was just playing his part and understanding how his game has to evolve based on some of his physical limitations. I still think the arm's there. I think he can make really good, accurate throws, but what made Aaron Rodgers a special player was how he can move within the pocket and extend plays and use his arm arrogance to do stuff. But I don't think he has the type of twitch and movement skills in the pocket anymore to do that. So can he just run the offense? And now you're looking at an offense that has these 3 tight ends and Washington, Freiermuth, and Jonnu Smith, a big receiver in Metcalf. Calvin Austin's kind of coming on. Like Arthur Smith is the play caller here. There's going to be a lot of design stuff and play action and building off of the run concepts and a lot of, you involving the backs and tight ends in some quick passes. Like, will he just do that, or will he want to kind of play off script the way that we've seen him his last 2 healthy seasons? I think it's a big wild card, but Jeremy, I think you've convinced me if Pittsburgh goes to the playoffs and wins a game, I think that'd be pretty successful for kind of what the narratives have been out of Pittsburgh the last several years.
It would definitely rehab both Rodgers and Tomlin in their current versions, which both have been thought to be great. Both are probably Hall of Famers, but right now they might need each other to just get a little bit of a positive pub out of each other.
Yeah, I agree. And I always wonder, what is the ownership think of Mike Tomlin? Is it different than what we do? Is there some grace for not necessarily giving him a quarterback? How much blame does he get for the miscalculations at quarterback, but still being able to get the team to winning records in the postseason? There's some tough layers there, but obviously the most important thing in the league is quarterback play, and they just haven't had it. And so on one hand, I don't expect him to go win playoff games with Mason Rudolph and Russell Wilson at this point in his career. And do I give Tomlin a lot of credit for being there? Yeah, in some ways, yes, but how much criticism does he get for not getting the quarterback piece right? And it feels like he's had a role. Trubisky, miscalculation. Kenny Pickett's a miscalculation. Russell Wilson, miscalculation. It's been pretty bad. Even late-stage Ben Roethlisberger really was tough to watch, but they still won games. So the credit-blame piece of Mike Tomlin can get a little complicated.
It really would feel like they'd have to get that AFC South matchup in the first round, wouldn't it? Because they could pull off, any team could pull off, it's the NFL, but nobody, I think, would envision them going to Kansas City or come here and win a playoff game like that.
Yeah, or Baltimore. I think if you're not Buffalo, Kansas City, or Baltimore, your whole objective in the AFC is to be the 5 seed and go play in Houston.
Yep.
right? That's what you want to happen, and hope that Houston doesn't take advantage of that bad division and wind up winning 12 games and being a top 3 seed in the conference. I think that's what the story is in the AFC. And Pittsburgh, I think, can Pittsburgh be the 5 and go beat Houston? Sure. And I think that'd be a great year for them if that's what they can do. I don't think they can go any further, but I think that would be successful. I think that would turn around some things with how Tomlin's perceived, and Rodgers certainly. I don't think many people think fondly of what's happened to him over the last few years, and I think if he goes out like that, I think that'd be a solid ending.
Joe Marino, Locked On Bills podcast. All right, Joe, we are 3 weeks away from the start of training camp. We're getting there. Wednesday, 3 weeks from today, we'll be at St. John Fisher. What is the number one thing you are eager to see, in the first couple practices? Like if you're there and you get to go watch a position group or go watch any one thing, what's the thing you would be most interested to see when you get there?
Yeah, I could say so many things, but you want me to pick one thing. I think I want to watch the corners. I want to see what type of comfort Max Hairston has in his assignments. I want to see what type of athleticism Trey White has if he winds up having to start games this year. What type of comfort exists there. I'm curious about Dorian Strong and what type of ability he shows. Jordan Hancock, I want to see what the role is going to be as this hybrid slot safety player. I think that's where my eyes are going to be. Cole Bishop's development is probably the secondary.
Yeah.
I could talk myself into D-line. I certainly want to see these receivers. I want to see Kincaid, but it's probably the corners with the overall investments in that secondary, and see how it's coming along.
To pick between the D-line and the corners, would you be, I don't know, what confidence is one, or variables of range of outcomes? I feel like what they've done on the defensive line, I expect that to be a pretty good, solid unit. I feel like Bosa, if healthy, along with the pieces they added in the draft, and Michael Hoyt and Ogunjobi once they get back, they've got veterans there, right? It's not a bunch of kids hoping to figure it out. So that might lead me to be a little more confident that that'll be good to go. But I don't know. That doesn't really have to be true. Would you have confidence up front that they're going to be a better unit than last year, just based on the sheer volume of changes that they made?
Yeah, they really should. And, you think about what's departing. It's 36-year-old Von Miller, and then 3 north of 30 defensive tackles in Austin Johnson, Jordan Phillips, and Quentin Jefferson. And all 4 of those guys are still looking for work. And that's what you said goodbye to while you welcome in, draft picks, established veterans. I feel like that should be in good shape. My goodness, with all the investments there, we cannot be having conversations next January and February about where was the defensive line impact. They've done the things that they needed to do to give themselves a chance to avoid that conversation. I think more of the uncertainty probably comes from the secondary, and obviously the secondary will benefit from what happens up front with their ability to wreak havoc and create pressure and create sacks and force pressured throws. But, yeah, I think there's a little bit more uncertainty with how the secondary comes together.
What about Milano for you, Joe, and linebacker at training camp and into the preseason? He might not play in the preseason, but the range of outcomes that we could get from him, how wide do you kind of consider that to be? Seeing him at the end of last year, but he also dealt with injuries and finally gets a full healthy offseason. I don't know, how wide do you think it is from the best case scenario for his 25 season to the worst case scenario?
Well, I think we saw him steadily improve upon his return last year. That gives me a lot of encouragement. I don't think it's going to be an issue of if he's available to play, right, and he's not injured and can't play. I think he's going to be at least as good as he was at the end of last season. I'm not super concerned that there's been athleticism zapped out of him. We've seen plenty of linebackers that are playing into their mid to late 30s, and Milano's going to be 31 this year. He's not that old. I think he'll be okay. It's just a matter of how durable can he be, because if he's available, I have a level of confidence that he can go out there and be an impact player for the defense. It's just, can he avoid something that's going to keep him off the field? And I think that's where my concerns lie. So if Milano can go, I feel good about what he can provide. Can he go, right? Is there going to be something along the way that keeps him on the sideline? And I think that's where the impact would be lost, would just be due to availability. If he's on the field, I I have a level of confidence in Matt Milano and what he can get done for this defense.
Joe Marino, Locked On Bills podcast, joining us here on the Western Hotline, 3 weeks out from training camp. I know, Joe, one of your newest episodes you put out was about Joe Brady and wrinkles to the offense, and Joe and I here got in a conversation about Kincaid earlier. It kind of just flew off of the Waller return to the NFL. Is Kincaid someone you feel like Brady can get a lot more out of than he has?
Yeah, 100%. And I think you start with acknowledging that per route run last year, Dalton Kincaid was the most targeted tight end in the NFL. Like, the Bills want to throw him the ball. And he's had 2 seasons of really good route running metrics in terms of separation rates and 2 really good seasons of yards after catch metrics. So it really just comes down to, can Josh Allen and Dalton Kincaid develop the chemistry that's necessary to maximize the opportunities that exist for Dalton Kincaid? And I think, of course, Dalton Kincaid needs to be durable and available and be stronger, right? Have the functional strength that the team's kind of called him out now for a couple of years on. That's what needs to happen. But ultimately, the opportunity is certainly there. And the role last year really was different. His average depth of target increased by 2 yards compared to the previous year. So I like where it's going, the idea of where it's going, if you will. It's just a matter of becoming more consistent with the outcome of the opportunities that he gets, which is partly on him. It's partly on Josh Allen. But I think as things become more stable, there was so much turnover last year with the offense. And I think that entering this year with really no turnover, I mean, you pretty much just say goodbye to Cooper and Hollins, you say hello to Palmer and Moore, and everything else is the same. Like, even the depth, the coaching staff, it should put this team in position to hit the ground running. And, I was actually recently going back and referencing a lot of the notes that I took throughout the course of last season. And last year, that team, third downs was not very good. They were running like 11 less plays per game than they were the previous season. And by the end of the year, the offense normalized and figured itself out. And so I think this offense is so much better equipped to hit the ground running this year. And it's no longer, Dalton Kincaid stepping in and there's a million vacated targets. I think there's a little bit more of an understanding of what everyone's going to need to do. And I think they'll hit the ground running a lot better than they did last year.
You also did a show building the Bills quarter century team. What'd you find is the toughest position to decide on for that?
I guess maybe linebacker, because one thing that was pretty revealing to me is that the Bills haven't had a ton of linebackers that were very long tenured players. It was 4 years of London Fletcher and 3 years of Takeo Spikes and Preston Brown for 4 years, but it wasn't even that good. So it's like I wind up picking Matt Milano and London Fletcher, and London Fletcher was only like a 4-year answer for the team. And I guess that's a decent tenure for the Bills or for any team, right, or for any player. But I just felt like that was the one position where it's like, man, there's not like a true anchor here where you've had 8-10 years of really good play. So it's just a lot of different guys sneaking in. Kawika Mitchell, had his moment in the sun. So I guess that was probably the spot.
Yeah, because you had 4 year stints for like 4 different. I mean, Paul Posluszny is 4 years, right? Like, right. It's just 4 years, 4 years, 4 years. Yeah.
To one, Joe and I talked about this, the quarter century team, and there's one spot we disagreed. And, whatever. There's honorable mentions. I'll ask you, Sneaky Joe.
Uh-huh.
Well, who are the 2 defensive ends should be on that team?
The 2 defensive ends.
The 2 defensive ends on the Bills' all-quarter century team. Who'd you pick?
Schobel and Mario.
Okay. All right. Well, we have a complete – this is perfect.
I didn't think – I thought about that for 3 seconds, though.
That's fine.
Yeah.
He went Schobel and Jerry Hughes.
Uh-huh.
You went Schobel and Mario. For me, Mario has to be on the list because he was – borderline dominant.
It's a peak versus longevity conversation here because does Hughes play more than double the games that Mario Williams does? But I remember, Joe, I think it was maybe in Hughes last year where he finally passed Williams on the sack list. So, but again, if you're going for someone who made an impact over a long period of time, I'm not going to argue hard against anyone that wants to put Jerry Hughes on there.
Yeah, I think that's where the disagreement came, and I don't have an argument for it. I mean, if you want to go with who had the most dominant stretch, it was the first 3 years of Mario Williams. And I think that's a heck of a case. But I leaned into the longevity. I mean, there was a point in time where he was, for many years, the longest tenured player on the team, and had a good run. But nope, he wasn't as dominant as Mario was for those 3 years. Part of
Schobel's, I don't know, mystique is that he retired and he just disappeared, right?
Never to be heard from again.
If they rolled out Aaron Schobel as legend of the game this year, right? Like,
it'd be crazy. I remember Eric Wood at one point Mike or Chris asked Eric Wood about it. I was like, I don't think I've talked to him since we played together.
He's just gone. So anyway,
the other mystique is I think his best stat is he has the most sacks on Tom Brady ever.
All right,
I think he still has. Really? I think he still has that title. He had it at one point. So I'll look that up.
Thanks, Joe.
Thanks for having me on, guys. Appreciate it.
Joe Marino, Locked On Bills podcast. He also does the Bills Squad Show with me and Jerry Ostrowski every Monday and Thursday. That's part of the Bills. It's part of the Locked On Bills channel.